Welcome to the 2024 Fendt Momentum Crop Tour. Once again, it is my pleasure to share this educational content full of agronomy trials, protocols, everything meant to help you, the farmers, improve your operations, and at the end, the bottom line. Here is what we'll cover today. We continue our research on optimum soybean population and row spacing choices. Then we dive into our traditional crop tour protocols, starting with how to set your downforce target using all information available. After that, we get to our partnership with the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign and take an underground view of soil compaction effects. Wrapping this chapter up with a trial on frame versus row unit mounted residue manager. Since we've just launched the Momentum 30-foot, we've obviously put it to the test. And we'll present to you the first trials on the 12 and the 23 row models. As we said in our last video, we bring to you Momentum dry fertilizer trials from Ontario, Canada, covering split application and high-speed planting with dry. As always, we'll do a recap of our main takeaways and finish the video with what's in the works for the next planting season. So, let's get to it. Over the last 2 years, we have done several soybean population and row spacing studies. A recent trend in soybean production is the push towards earlier planting dates, as farmers have realized a pretty significant yield impact in some instances. So, we've set ourselves to find some answers. Therefore, we've established 6 field trial locations across 4 states during the 2022 and 2023 growing season. The general plot layout at each field compared 4 different seeding rates at 2 or 3 different row spacing widths. Seeding rates ranged from 40 to 200,000 seeds per acre. And row spacing comparisons varied between narrow row spacing, so under 10 inches, which were always planted with the drill, and 30, 20, and 15-inch plots, which were always established with the planter. When we look at the actual measured plant population that achieved the highest yield at each location, the average across all locations was around 108,000 plants per acre, but with some variation depending on the location. Most agronomists agree that the minimum final population should be between 100 and 120,000 plants per acre, and our results would mostly agree with that. Now, the question then becomes, what should I do for a seeding rate? In our trials, the best seeding rate ranged anywhere from 90 all the way to 200,000. But on average, across all locations, row spacings and equipment, 140,000 seeding rate was the best. Let's take a closer look at the data, specifically on row spacing. If we look at 4 locations comparing 15 inches row with the planter to 7.5 inches rows with the drill, the optimum seeding rate to maintain max yield was always higher on a drill, about 160,000, compared to the planter, which was at 115,000. Still on row spacing, observe this research on narrow rows, 15 inches, versus wider, 30, 36 inches. Often, there is a slightly more 1 to 4 bushel an acre yield on narrow rows. However, 31% of the time, there's less than 1 bushel an acre difference. A lot of this difference comes down to growing conditions and planting date. Later planting dates usually favor narrow spacing. Early planting dates and good growing conditions usually negate row spacing effect on yield. For example, we did one study in central Illinois comparing 10, 15, and 30 inches and found very little difference. But these plots were planted early April, and like we just said, early planting. And the final yield was about 80 bushels an acre. Our conclusion is that row spacing decisions should be based on your operations needs and your objectives. If you are double cropping or struggling with herbicide weed resistance, if your planting dates are likely to be later, all these would recommend narrower row soybean, 15 inches or less. On the other hand, if you can plant sooner, or if you're using a planter, or focusing on disease control, you are better off with wider row soybeans, 30 inches or more. Regarding population, max yield stands were about 110,000 plants per acre. But the decision to make is how to get there. Defining your seeding rate must consider seed germination score and emergence potential. This is why drills on average require higher seeding rate than planters. For last, do not forget that buffering against unexpected events like early season hail or cold snaps that can reduce stands should be considered. Our objective in this trial was to show how optimum downforce levels should be adjusted based on field conditions and the metrics provided in the 2020 monitor. For example, how to set delta force using the ground contact percentage and margin values, without forgetting the importance of getting out of the cab and digging frequently to make sure we are maintaining target depth without overcompacting the sidewalls. In most situations, running around 120 pounds target downforce for momentum planters is a good starting point. Close to 100% ground contact and about 20 to 50 pounds of margin. However, we will show you examples from two very different studies from 2023, where we ran 90, 120, and 150 pounds of automated downforce pressure to show how these requirements can change based on field conditions. On location 1, it was super dry, mellow, and fluffy soil with very aggressive tillage, and we were running narrow gauge wheels. In this case, it helped us to run heavier downforce pressure target, 150 pounds, to firm the soil around the furrow. Because in drier soil conditions, there's less likelihood of creating sidewall compaction. On location 2, we had pretty good conditions at planting, but the ground was already fairly firm. I wouldn't say hard by any means, but we definitely needed more downforce pressure than 90 pounds to maintain ground contact and target depth. However, as you can see, yield started to dip back down again when we ran too heavy. This is because that particular soil type, even though it wasn't necessarily wet, is very prone to compaction. We probably created too much compaction around the furrow at the downforce target of 150 pounds. Another key factor to consider when setting your downforce is speed. Typically, higher planting speeds require additional downforce for a more consistent row unit ride and to maintain ground engagement throughout the field. Why is this adjustment so important? You need just enough downforce to keep that row unit in the ground, maintaining target depth with a uniform furrow, but not to the point that you are over-compacting the furrow. So it's really striking that balance. Over the last 4 years, Fendt has done soil compaction trials all over the Corn Belt and in other states in the US and Canada, most of the time comparing momentum to competitive planters, and in several cases done by independent research entities. Well, last year we chose to take these trials to a whole new level. In partnership with the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, Fendt is now sharing an underground view of soil compaction effects. Aside from the classic penetrometer readings, we have analyzed CT scans of soil cores taken from the fields. These scans allow the university to measure the pore space in the soil from surface to 12 inches deep, therefore providing us a quantitative analysis of soil compaction. We have compared the levels of compaction from a competitive planter versus Momentum pulled either by a tractor with tracks or row crop duals. The spots chosen for soil core sampling are between rows 4 and 5, so an area with no traffic, then 2 locations in the center frame, next to the planter pinch rows and affected rows, as the graphic is showing. The result after planting in 2 different locations with 5 replications in each trial was as expected. There is no doubt that the soil core from the no traffic area shows the highest level of cumulative pore space. And it makes sense. There's no contact pressure, no weight being applied to the ground, hence less or almost no compaction. Now, looking at the planter pass's cumulative pore space, right in the center frame behind the wheels, we go to the complete opposite. The soil cores that have the lowest level of pore space, so high compaction, which again, there's no surprise, after all, we're right there next to the pinch row, is with the competitive planter. There is compaction from the tractor tires and the planter tires. And for last, we look into the 2 momentum plots. Regardless of being pulled by tracks or duals, the level of porosity is consistently higher. So we leave less soil compaction behind. After planting 2 40-acre fields, splitting each pass of each field into a different plot, just like a classic strip trial, the yield loss of the competitive planter versus Momentum and its compaction management features was 11 bushels an acre against Momentum with row crop duals, and that is a statistically significant difference. While against Momentum with tracks, the win was 2.3 bushels, which is not. If we were to combine both Momentum trial averages, the yield advantage of Momentum versus the competitive planter would show 6.7 bushels an acre. This trial started just like another side-by-side protocol between Momentum and a competitive planter, where the focus was on compaction and efficiency. But as we were checking the specification of both planters, we purposefully kept one key difference. The competitive planter had a frame-mounted residue manager, while Momentum had a row unit-mounted residue manager. The side-by-side protocol was very simple. Compare the yield on both planters at 2 levels of high-speed planting, a must-have for this customer. So we've done it at 8 miles an hour and at an average of 11 miles an hour, so between 10 and 12. The results are shown, and then the question arises, what happened to the significant yield advantage of Momentum when we pushed upwards double-digit speeds? And our conclusion, not just looking at the yield, but at the metrics from the 2020 monitor, such as Good Ride and SRI, was that the frame-mounted option running at double-digit speeds kept the impact of the residue manager away from the row unit. Whereas on Momentum, with the row unit mounted version, the impact was transferred to the row unit, affecting the smoothness of the ride and seed placement. When planting at 8 miles an hour, which is still high-speed planting, there was no detriment to yield, and Momentum's superior performance was visible. Last year was the public launch of the all-new Momentum 30-foot. The size may be new, but the agronomic features of the planter are known and proven. However, there could be a farmer that asks, do I need weight management on a 30-foot planter? Will it provide the same benefits we've been seeing on Momentum planters all over? So, we've put them to the test. We ran trials on both 12-row and 23 split-row models in West Virginia and in Iowa, mostly in no-till soils, planting into a lot of residue and hilly terrains. In the two West Virginia locations, the Momentum planter was a 12-row 30, while the competitive one was a 12-row 30 Harvest International bar fitted with all precision planting technology. So in the end, we were truly comparing the planter toolbars. And Momentum's floating toolbar performance, keeping the row unit parallel to the ground and seed on target depth, made a significant contribution to the yield advantages. So let's see the results. The yield benefits of Momentum compared to the competitive planter range from 6 to 8 bushels an acre more. In the third trial in Iowa, we've used the 23-row 15 Momentum and basically tested our compaction management features, running Momentum against itself. So the protocol had Momentum with all its technology activated, automatic weight sensing, self-adjusting weight management, and automatic tire inflation. And then we would turn it off. Even with low logic off, Momentum still features no pinch rows and the VCT, our floating toolbar. That's why in West Virginia, we've beaten competition even with low logic off. But back to Iowa. In this location, in Charter Oak, Iowa, another no-till environment, low logic showed its value once more, with a yield benefit of 4 bushels an acre. The point is that even with a 30-foot model, so a lighter planter, we still see the benefits to low logic compaction management system, just like with the 40 and the 60-foot models. This trial was planted in Ontario, Canada, with a customer that traded his old planter with an additional cart and a truckload of aftermarket technology for a Momentum dry fertilizer that comes with everything from the factory ready to plant and apply. The catch was that his old planter plus the cart used to give him more dry fertilizer capacity. So his question was very clear. Can I run less fertilizer with the planter instead of 100% with the cart and split apply without losing yield? Here is the answer. It was not detrimental to apply half of his fertilizer pre-plant and then the rest at planting. The Momentum dry fertilizer planter features the frame-mounted opener from O'Leary. So we used the Ontario trial to put our opener into a high-speed planting test. Basically, can these frame-mounted openers maintain yield performance at higher speeds between 8 and 10 miles an hour? So here are the results. Most frame-mounted options are bolted to a dead, immovable toolbar. So there was the drive to show how a frame-mounted component would perform when mounted to the VCT with all its flex and flotation. But as we can see, the O'Leary openers perform as expected, and regardless of the speed, they did the job. After 2 years of trials, established in 6 field trial locations across 4 states, our optimum population is about 110,000 plants per acre. And on average, our best seeding rate to get there came from 140,000. But it is key to consider what's your equipment emergence potential to define that. When it comes to row spacing, there is no recipe. So start with what you want to achieve and then choose between narrow or wider rows. Check back our soybean chapter for the details when to choose one or another. Downforce, it's not a set it and leave it configuration. And you should use everything available to make sure you are striking that balance between firming the furrow, hitting depth, without over-compacting it. So use ground engagement percentage, margin, speed, ground conditions, and always go back and dig. Pore space is key for a healthy root system, which leads to good emergence and higher yields. Now that you've literally seen the effects of soil compaction at planting, minimize it in your operation and reap the benefits this next harvest. Regardless of which planter size you have, 60, 40, or 30 foot, having a compaction management solution will impact your yield and profitability. So remember it when choosing your next planter. For last, the choice is yours. Whether you prefer liquid or dry fertilizer, Fendt has an effective solution for your operation. As we shift the focus to the upcoming planting season that is upon us, in our next video, we will keep expanding the crops, the states we plant in, and the models as we do our trials. Next year, we'll bring to you our first wheat trial, planter versus drill. And as we keep our expansion into Canada, we are partnering with a college, and we'll bring to you another independent trial, this time on canola, sharing all the benefits and differences from planting canola versus drilling. And be sure to expect more protocols and trials on our recent new offerings, such as the Momentum 30-foot and the dry fertilizer option. I hope you enjoyed this video and have a great season. Thank you.